The words came through, static, laced, and desperate, cutting through the howling wind like a blade through flesh. Marcus Webb's weathered hands paused over the plasma welder, the blue arc flickering and dying as he reached for the comm panel. 3 years on Arcturus 9 had taught him to recognize distress when he heard it, but this signal carried something else, something raw and broken that made the hairs on his neck stand up. "Please, anyone. I'm dying." The voice belonged to a woman, young, terrified. Marcus stared at the readout showing the beacon's origin point, 2 kilometers north, straight into the teeth of the storm that had been building for the past 6 hours. Every instinct screamed at him to ignore it. Call it into command. Let someone else handle the mess. He'd spent 40 years learning that lesson the hard way. His reflection stared back from the darkened monitor, 68 years old, gray stubble covering a face carved by wind and regret, eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. The medical kit hung on the wall behind him, standard issue from a war that ended before most people on this rock were born. Desert Storm, Kuwait, 1991. A lifetime ago and yesterday all at once. The beacon pulsed again. Weaker this time. Marcus closed his eyes and saw sand instead of snow. Heard screams in Arabic and English, mixing with the thunder of artillery. Felt the weight of men dying under his hands because he'd made the wrong call, taken the wrong road, arrived 3 minutes too late. February 26, 1991. 3 good soldiers reduced to names on a memorial wall because their medic couldn't save them. He grabbed the medical kit. The wind hit him like a fist the moment he stepped outside Station Delta 7. Temperature readout in his visor showed negative 42 Celsius and dropping. The storm had grown teeth ice crystals sharp enough to shred exposed skin, wind strong enough to knock a man off his feet if he wasn't careful. Marcus lowered his head and pushed forward, following the beacon's signal through the whiteout. 2 kilometers became an eternity of frozen hell. His lungs burned with each breath despite the rebreather. His legs screamed protest with every step. But he'd marched through worse. The Kuwaiti desert in full NBC gear, 70 pounds of equipment in 100-degree heat, blood soaking through his gloves as he tried to hold together men who'd been torn apart by shrapnel and fire. The beacon led him to a depression in the ice, a natural hollow that offered minimal shelter from the storm. Marcus almost missed her, just another shadow in the endless white. Then he saw the blood. It painted the snow in dark streaks, already freezing into crimson ice. The woman lay crumpled against a boulder, one arm clutched to her side where something had torn through flesh and muscle. She wore armor of a design Marcus had never seen, all flowing curves and organic lines that seemed to grow from her body rather than cover it. And her face, not human. Silver-white fur covered her features, though blood matted it in places. Her skull had an elongated shape, almost wolf-like, with high cheekbones, and a jaw that looked designed for tearing meat. But her eyes, those were undeniably intelligent, even as they fluttered half-closed with approaching unconsciousness. One hand clutched something that might have been a crown, though most of the crystals had shattered. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, training overriding shock. ABC airway breathing circulation. Her breathing came shallow and rapid, pulse thready beneath his fingers. The wound in her side leaked blood with each heartbeat. Arterial damage. She had minutes, maybe less. His hands moved on autopilot, tearing open the medical kit and pulling out what he needed. Synthetic skin spray to seal the wound. Coagulant foam to stop the bleeding. A stim shot to keep her heart going long enough to get her inside. The supplies were meant for humans, but biology was biology. Arteries worked the same way regardless of species. The woman's eyes snapped open as he sprayed the wound, brilliant amber irises that seemed to glow in the storm's dim light. Her hand shot out, gripping his wrist with strength that made his bones creak. For a moment, they stared at each other, human and alien, predator and prey locked in a moment of mutual incomprehension. Then her grip loosened, her eyes focused on his face, studying him with an intensity that felt invasive. "You," the word came out in accented English, rough with pain. "You touched the crown." Marcus glanced at the shattered circlet lying in the snow. He'd moved it aside without thinking, clearing space to work. Nothing special about it now, just broken crystal and twisted metal. "Easy now. You've lost a lot of blood. I need to get you inside before we both freeze to death." She tried to sit up, failed, and slumped back with a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "You don't understand. Only those of ancient blood can touch the crown without—" Her words cut off as her eyes rolled back, unconscious again. Marcus didn't waste time trying to puzzle out her meaning. He secured the wound dressing, jabbed the stim shot into her thigh, and began the brutal work of getting a 7-foot alien back to his station. The return journey tested every ounce of strength he had left. She outweighed him by at least 50 pounds, all of it muscle and bone that felt denser than human tissue. He rigged a makeshift sled from the thermal blanket, dragging her through the snow while the storm tried its best to kill them both. His old war wounds screamed the knee that never healed right after taking shrapnel, the shoulder that still ached when the temperature dropped the scarred tissue in his lungs from breathing burning oil smoke. By the time Station Delta 7's lights appeared through the storm, Marcus wasn't sure which of them was in worse shape. He hauled her through the airlock, sealed it behind them, and collapsed against the wall while the chamber cycled. His heart hammered hard enough to crack ribs. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. For a moment he wondered if this was it, if he'd finally pushed his 68-year-old body past its breaking point. Then the inner door opened, and warm air rushed in, and he forced himself to move again. The station's medical bay consisted of a single automated stretcher and some basic equipment designed to keep a maintenance worker alive until real help arrived. Marcus hauled the alien onto the stretcher and let the diagnostic systems get to work while he peeled off his frozen outer layers. His hands shook. Adrenaline crash combined with hypothermia and exhaustion. Nothing he hadn't experienced before. The stretcher screen lit up with readings that made no sense. Heart rate if she had a heart registered at 30 beats per minute. Blood pressure through the floor. Temperature dropping despite the thermal blankets. The AI kept throwing error messages, unable to reconcile alien physiology with its human-based programming. Marcus pushed the useless machine aside and went old school. Another dose of stim, more synthetic skin over the wound. IV fluids running wide open to replace blood volume. He worked with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in field hospitals and bombed out buildings and the backs of helicopters fleeing from enemy fire. Somewhere in the middle of his second hour keeping her alive, his personal comm chimed. Marcus ignored it. It chimed again and again. Finally, he snarled and activated the connection. His daughter's face filled the screen. Sarah Chen, she'd taken her mother's surname after the divorce. 42 years old now, wearing the dress uniform of U.S. Space Command with captain's bars gleaming on her collar. Beautiful and competent, and every inch the officer Marcus had never managed to become. Dad, it's been 3 years. The words carried no accusation, just exhaustion. They'd had this conversation before. Monthly for the first year, then quarterly, now just whenever Sarah decided to try again. I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. Work's been... Don't. She held up one hand. Please don't tell me about work. I pulled your assignment logs. You've logged maybe 40 hours in the past 6 months. You're not working. You're hiding. Marcus glanced at the alien woman on the stretcher. Her breathing had stabilized at least. Pulse stronger. Color returning to the visible patches of skin beneath the fur. Sarah, this isn't a good time. It's never a good time. Her voice softened. Dad, I know Desert Storm still haunts you. I know you blame yourself for losing those men. But it's been 33 years. At some point, you have to stop running. Kuwait City flashed behind his eyes. The smell of burning oil. The sound of rounds impacting all around them. The weight of Private First Class Daniel Morrison dying in his arms because Marcus had ordered them down the wrong street. 23 years old. 2 daughters back home. Gone. I'll call you back, Sarah, I promise. There's something I need to handle. You're still running from Desert Storm, aren't you? From what happened in Kuwait? The comm went dead before she could say anything else. Marcus stared at the blank screen for a long moment, hating himself and hating how right she was. Then he turned back to his patient. The alien's eyes had opened again. This time they tracked him with full awareness, studying his face with that same unsettling intensity. You saved my life. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered in a voice like gravel and honey mixed together. That's what medics do. She tried to sit up. Marcus moved to stop her, but she was already upright, swinging her legs off the stretcher with a grace that seemed impossible given how close to death she'd been 2 hours ago. The armor, if that's what it was, had sealed itself over the wound, showing no sign of the trauma beneath. I am Lyara Moonwhisper, rightful queen of the Draven Empire. She paused, watching for his reaction. Or I was, before the betrayal. Marcus kept his face neutral. Didn't matter if she was a queen or a janitor, everyone bled the same when you opened them up. Marcus Webb, maintenance worker, and before you ask, I don't know anything about Draven politics or empires. I just didn't want you dying on my watch. Something flickered across her alien features, surprise maybe or respect. She reached out and placed one clawed hand against his chest directly over his heart. The touch sent electricity racing through his nervous system, every nerve ending suddenly aware of her presence. You touched the crown. You saved a dying royal under the blood moon. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Do you know what that means? Marcus started to shake his head but stopped as the contact point between her hand and his chest began to glow. Pale blue light seeped through his shirt, spreading in patterns that looked like circuit diagrams mixed with ancient script. It didn't hurt. Quite the opposite warmth flooded through him, driving away aches he'd carried for decades. Ancient law binds you as my sentinel now. Your life to mine. Your blade to my throne. Until death claims us both. The glow faded. Marcus stumbled backward, breaking contact. His chest still tingled where she touched him, and when he looked down, he could see a faint mark through his shirt, a circular pattern that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. I didn't sign up for, or neither did I. Liara's expression hardened. But Varkos Ironclaw knows you helped me now. He will send forces to eliminate you. You became a target the moment you touched the crown. Then I'll call U.S. Command. They'll evacuate you, send you back to your people, and your government signed treaties with Varkos 2 months ago. They recognize him as the legitimate ruler of the Draven Empire. They will not help a deposed queen. She moved to the station's small window, looking out at the storm. And even if they would, we don't have time. His hunters are already coming. As if on cue, the station's proximity alarm shrieked to life. Marcus lunged for the console, pulling up external sensors. 3 contacts approaching fast from the south. Atmospheric craft military configuration bearing straight for Station Delta 7. ETA 15 minutes. His hands moved across the controls, triggering distress beacons and emergency protocols. Nothing happened. The communication array was dead, not damaged, but actively jammed by something with far more power than his maintenance station possessed. They'll demand I surrender. Liara turned from the window. I will refuse. They will kill us both. Marcus stared at the approaching contacts. 15 minutes. Desert Storm had taught him what happened to people who got caught between empires and their wars. Nothing good, nothing clean, just blood and fire and bodies left to rot in the sand. There's a mining tunnel 2 kilometers north. Old survey route from when they first established the colony. We can hide there. They have thermal scanners. They will find us in minutes. The medical kit still lay open on the counter. Marcus grabbed a vial he'd never had occasion to use before, hypothermia serum, designed to rapidly drop body temperature in case of severe fever or heat stroke. Dangerous as hell if used wrong. Perfect for what he had in mind. Learned this trick in Alaska. Wilderness training, 1989. We drop our core temperature below 20 degrees Celsius, we become invisible to thermal sensors. He loaded 2 doses into injectors. We'll have 20 minutes before organ failure. Should be enough to get past their patrols. Liara stared at him. For a moment, he thought she'd refuse. Then she held out her arm. In Desert Storm, you called this a calculated risk. In Desert Storm, I patched up 12 men under Iraqi fire. You think 3 of you scare me? The serum hit like liquid nitrogen in his veins. Marcus gasped as his body temperature plummeted, fingers going numb, vision swimming. Across from him, Liara weathered it better though, even she shuddered as the cold sank into her bones. They had 5 minutes before the shaking got too bad to walk. Marcus led them out into the storm again, moving as fast as their failing bodies allowed. The wind felt different now, still brutal, but more distant, like it was happening to someone else. Hypothermia played tricks on the mind. He'd seen it before in soldiers who'd spent too long in the cold. The important thing was to keep moving, keep focused, reach the objective before the shutdown became permanent. The tunnel entrance sat hidden behind a rock formation that provided minimal shelter. Marcus almost missed it in the whiteout, but his fingers remembered the way even if his eyes couldn't quite focus anymore. They stumbled inside just as his internal countdown hit 18 minutes. 3 Imperial hunters roared overhead, thermal sensors sweeping the area and finding nothing but frozen rock. The antidote burned worse than the serum. Marcus felt his body temperature spike, blood rushing back into extremities with agonizing pins and needles. He collapsed against the tunnel wall, shaking so hard his teeth rattled. Beside him, Liara managed to stay upright, though her breathing came in harsh gasps. That was, she trailed off, unable to find words. Welcome to human field medicine. The tunnel stretched deep into Arcturus 9's crust, wide enough for two people walking abreast. Emergency lighting still functioned after all these years, casting everything in sickly yellow. Marcus forced himself to his feet and started walking. Standing still meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering. Remembering meant Kuwait and Morrison's blood on his hands. They'd gone maybe half a kilometer when Liara stopped suddenly. Her head tilted ears that Marcus hadn't noticed before swiveling to catch sounds he couldn't hear. The walls, they're speaking. Marcus looked around, just rock and ice, same as it had been for 3 years. Then Liara reached out and placed her palm against the tunnel wall. Light erupted from the contact point, spreading like cracks through glass. Ancient symbols became visible, glowing with the same blue radiance that had marked his chest. A section of wall swung inward, revealing a chamber beyond. And floating in the center of that chamber, surrounded by a field of energy that made Marcus's teeth ache. A sphere, maybe 3 feet in diameter, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change even as he watched. It rotated slowly, humming with a power that set every nerve ending on fire. The sphere's rotation stopped. Light pulsed from its surface, sweeping over Marcus like a searchlight. He felt it probe deep, touching something fundamental in his cells, his DNA, his very existence. Then a voice, genderless, ageless, utterly alien, spoke inside his skull. Genetic match confirmed. Descendant of Commander Daniel Cross identified. Access granted to Helix Network. The chamber lit up like noon. Additional lights activated throughout the space, revealing equipment that looked simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced. Weapon racks, armor stands, something that might have been a medical station. And in the center of the far wall, a holographic projection unit that flickered to life. A man appeared in the projection field. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a uniform that Marcus recognized United States Space Force, though the design dated back at least 200 years. An American flag patch sat prominent on his right shoulder. The man's face carried the same bone structure as Marcus's own, the same sharp cheekbones and determined jaw. If you're watching this, I'm either dead or worse, the hologram's voice carried command and sorrow in equal measure. My name is Commander Daniel Cross. If the Helix system accepted you, then you're my descendant. And that means the Empire has fallen. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't move. Just watched as his ancestor, how many generations removed, delivered a message across 2 centuries. I helped Queen Silvera seal the Void Gate in 2047, trapping the Devourers before they could consume our galaxy. But the seal wasn't perfect, and I knew someone would eventually try to break it. Cross's expression hardened. If you're hearing this, that someone is probably descendant of General Thrak, the man who betrayed us all those years ago. His bloodline carries the key to opening the gate. Liara made a sound like breaking glass. Varkos. His full name is Varkos Ironclaw Thrak. I thought the Thrak line died out generations ago. The hologram continued as if it could hear her. You must reach the Sacred Heart Temple. Only there can the true queen reclaim her throne and stop the gate from opening. But understand, the path will cost you everything. It did me. It will you. Cross seemed to look directly at Marcus. In Desert Storm, you learned that leadership means sacrifice. You'll need that lesson again. Don't run from it this time. The projection winked out. The chamber went dark except for the sphere's pulsing glow. Marcus stood frozen, mind reeling. How could Cross know about Desert Storm, about Kuwait, unless the Helix reads genetic memory? Liara's voice came soft. It knows everything your ancestors experienced, feels what they felt, learns from their mistakes. Thunder cracked through the tunnel, not weather this time. Explosives. Marcus spun toward the entrance as the entire mountain shook. Rock dust rained from the ceiling. The hunters had found them. Another explosion closer this time. The tunnel began to collapse, massive chunks of stone breaking free and crashing down. Liara grabbed Marcus's arm and hauled him deeper into the chamber, away from the cascading debris. The entrance disappeared under tons of rock and ice, sealing them in. Static crackled through emergency frequency. Then a voicemail dripping with false courtesy cut through the white noise. Varkos Ironclaw to the fugitives, I admire your resilience. Really I do, but this ends now. Surrender the Pretender Queen and I'll make your death quick. Force me to dig you out and I'll take my time with both of you. Marcus looked at Liara. She stared back, and in her alien features, he saw the same trapped desperation he had felt in Kuwait when the convoy stopped and the ambush began, and he realized they were all going to die because he'd made the wrong call. There has to be another exit. His voice came hoarse. Survey teams wouldn't tunnel this deep without an emergency route. The helix sphere pulsed brighter. Light spread across the floor, illuminating a path that led to the chamber's far wall. Where it touched another door revealed itself ancient metal that shouldn't exist but did, covered in the same shifting symbols as the sphere. Exit route located. The sphere's voice resonated in their bones. Sacred Heart Temple distance 200 kilometers. Optimal path through ice caves. Warning, hostile forces detected along route. Probability of survival 14%. Liara straightened despite the blood still staining her armor. 14% is better than 0. The door opened onto darkness and cold. Behind them, Varkos's forces began cutting through the collapsed tunnel with equipment that shrieked like tortured metal. Marcus thought of Morrison dying in the sand, thought of Sarah asking when he'd stop running, thought of 40 years spent hiding from choices he'd made and men he'd failed to save. Maybe Cross was right. Maybe it was time to stop running from the fight. He stepped through the door. Liara followed. The metal slid shut behind them with a sound like a tomb closing. And somewhere in the frozen dark ahead, their path to the Sacred Heart began. Darkness swallowed them whole. Marcus activated his helmet lamp, the beam cutting through black so absolute it felt solid. The tunnel stretched ahead like a throat leading into some frozen beast's belly, walls slick with ice that reflected light and fractured patterns. His breath formed clouds that hung in the air, freezing almost instantly. Liara moved ahead without hesitation, her alien eyes apparently needing no artificial illumination. She navigated the treacherous footing with fluid grace while Marcus picked his way, carefully, old knees protesting every step. The helix sphere had compressed itself into a device the size of a baseball, now magnetically attached to his belt and pulsing with faint blue light. 2 hours into the journey, the tunnel opened into a cavern so vast Marcus's lamp couldn't find the far wall. Stalactites longer than buildings hung from a ceiling, lost in shadow. The floor dropped away in terraced levels, each one coated in ice smooth as glass, and everywhere bones. They jutted from the ice in frozen tableaus of ancient violence. Draven skeletons, judging by the skull shape mixed with something else. Human remains wearing armor that matched the design Cross had worn in the hologram. Hundreds of them locked in eternal combat. The Battle of Frozen Gates. Liara's voice echoed off distant walls. 2,000 years ago, Silvera and Cross fought the Devourers here. This was where the first seal formed. Marcus knelt beside a human skeleton, brushing ice from the breastplate. Dog tags hung around the vertebrae, actual metal identification tags, though the stamping had corroded beyond legibility. He'd carried the same type in Desert Storm before everything went digital. Cross said the seal wasn't perfect. Nothing touched by Devourers can be truly sealed, only contained. Liara picked her way between the dead. The gate exists in 17 places across the galaxy simultaneously. Seal 1 and pressure builds in the others. Varkos only needs to break 3 seals to create a resonance cascade. Then they all fail at once. The implications sat heavy in Marcus's gut. He'd seen apocalyptic scenarios during his service, biological weapons nuclear exchanges, scenarios where millions died in hours. This sounded worse. Movement flickered at the edge of his lamp beam. Marcus froze, hand dropping to the sidearm he'd grabbed before fleeing the station. The weapon felt inadequate against whatever could survive in this frozen hell, but it beat empty hands. A shape detached from the shadows. Massive. Quadrupedal, covered in white fur so thick it looked like armor. The creature stood easily 8 feet at the shoulder, with a head that seemed too large for its body and jaws that could bite a man in half. Red eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory focus. Frostmaw! Liara's hand went to a blade Marcus hadn't noticed before, concealed somehow in her armor. Ancient guardian species. They protect Devourer contamination sites, killing anything that gets too close. The Frostmaw took a step forward, Its breath came out in plumes that crystallized instantly. Behind it, Marcus caught movement, smaller shapes, maybe 5 or 6 circling to flank them. A hunting pack. Can we fight them? We can die trying. The alpha frostmaw charged. Marcus squeezed off 3 rounds that spanged harmlessly off its hide before Lyara shoved him aside. The creature's claws scored deep gouges in the ice where he'd been standing. Lyara's blade flashed, finding a gap in the fur and drawing blood that steamed in the cold. The frostmaw roared and backhanded her across the cavern. She hit ice hard enough to crack it. Didn't move. The pack closed in, sensing weakness. Marcus's training kicked in before conscious thought. He yanked a flare from his emergency kit and ignited it, the brilliant magnesium light exploding across the cavern. Frostmaw's recoiled eyes, adapting to darkness, suddenly assaulted by illumination intense enough to burn retinas. He ran to Lyara, checking vitals with hands that moved on autopilot. Pulse strong, breathing steady, unconscious but alive. The pack recovered from the flare, advancing again with murderous intent. Then Marcus saw it, what the frostmaws were actually protecting. Behind the alpha, partially hidden by a rock formation, sat a cluster of eggs. Each one larger than Marcus's torso, covered in the same white fur as the adults, pulsing with internal warmth. A den site. They weren't hunting for food. They were protecting their young. Easy. Marcus kept his voice low, unthreatening. He holstered the useless pistol and raised both hands. Easy now, I'm not here for your babies. The alpha paused, head tilting. Intelligence flickered in those red eyes, more than animal cunning, something deeper. It watched as Marcus carefully lifted Lyara, supporting her weight. Watched as he began backing toward a side passage, moving away from the eggs. For a long moment, the outcome balanced on a knife's edge. Then the alpha sat back on its haunches, not relaxing, still ready to tear them apart if needed, but allowing retreat. The pack followed its lead, maintaining distance, but no longer pressing attack. Marcus didn't question the reprieve. He carried Lyara into the side tunnel, moving as quickly as caution allowed. The frostmaws watched until they were out of sight, then returned to their vigil over the eggs. Half a kilometer later, Marcus's legs gave out. He set Lyara down as gently as collapsing muscles allowed, then sagged against the tunnel wall. His heart hammered hard enough to crack ribs. Black spots danced at vision's edge. 68 years old, carrying a woman who outweighed him by 50 pounds, running on adrenaline and fear. The math didn't work. You saved them. Lyara's voice made him jump. She sat up slowly, one hand pressed to ribs that had probably cracked from the impact. Her eyes studied him with renewed intensity. What? The frostmaws? You saw the eggs. Understood they were just protecting family. She moved closer, ignoring her injuries. Most soldiers would have kept fighting. Killed the alpha, massacred the pack, destroyed potential threats. They weren't threats, just scared parents. A memory surfaced, not Kuwait this time, but earlier. A checkpoint outside Basra. Iraqi mother and child approaching, hands raised, clearly terrified. His lieutenant had given the order to fire warning shots. Marcus had countermanded it, gone forward alone, discovered they were just looking for food and medicine. The lieutenant had written him up for insubordination. Marcus hadn't cared. Back in the Gulf, we had rules of engagement. Don't fire on non-combatants. That creature wasn't our enemy. It was just protecting its family. Like us. Lyara reached out and touched his face, a gesture so unexpected and gentle that Marcus froze. Her clawed fingers traced his jawline with surprising tenderness. You're not like other soldiers. You see life, not just threats to eliminate. Heat spread from the contact point, similar to when she'd marked him, but softer, more intimate. Marcus became acutely aware of their proximity, of how her alien features carried their own strange beauty in the helmet lamp's glow, of how long it had been since anyone had touched him with anything resembling affection. He pulled back carefully, not wanting to offend, but needing distance. We should keep moving. Varkos won't stop searching. Lyara's hand lingered a moment before falling. Something flickered across her features, disappointment maybe, or understanding. She nodded and stood, testing her weight on legs that still worked despite the punishment they'd taken. The Helix device pulsed, projecting a holographic map that floated between them. Their position showed as a blue dot, the Sacred Heart Temple, as a green star impossibly far ahead, and between them dozens of red contacts spreading out in search patterns. Imperial hunter teams. Liara studied the tactical display with a soldier's eye. Varkos committed serious resources. He wants us dead badly enough to risk exposing his forces this far from controlled territory. Why you said he already has the throne? What's one exiled queen matter? Because I can still invoke ancient law. The trial of champions, single combat for the throne. If I reach the Sacred Heart and make the formal challenge, every Draven clan will honor it, even those loyal to Varkos. Her expression hardened. He knows I'd choose a champion. You. Marcus barked a laugh that echoed off frozen walls. I'm 68 years old. I fix broken water pumps for a living. He'd tear me apart. You carry Sentinel blood. With proper equipment from the Helix Armory, you'd stand a chance. She paused. Not a good chance, but a chance. The device chimed. A new alert spread across the holographic display text in English that made Marcus's blood run cold. Alert American colonist, hostages secured by Varkos forces. Station Theta personnel, total 287 civilians. Ultimatum issued, Queen Liara surrenders within 48 hours or executions begin at 10 per hour. Station Theta, Marcus knew people there. Not well 3 years of self-imposed isolation had seen to that, but enough. Jim Rodriguez, maintenance supervisor. 2 daughters back on Earth. Sarah Martinez, hydroponics specialist. Pregnant with her first child. Walt Chen, security chief. Retired Marine Desert Storm veteran like Marcus. His hands clenched into fists, hard enough that knuckles cracked. He's baiting you. Classic terrorist tactics: take hostages, force an emotional response, exploit the mistake. I know. Liara's voice carried steel. But knowing doesn't change the reality. Those people are innocents. If I do nothing, they die. And if you surrender, everyone dies when Varkos opens the gate. She met his eyes, and Marcus saw the weight of leadership that came with crowns and responsibility. He'd seen it before in officers making impossible choices, seen it in mirrors reflected back from his own haunted face after Kuwait. The Helix device chimed again. This time the hologram shifted, showing a new figure. Elderly Draven male, fur gone silver white with age, wearing robes marked with symbols of rank or religious significance. When he spoke, his voice carried the gravel of centuries. Queen Liara, I am Elder Corin Silvermane of the Sacred Heart. I've monitored your progress since you entered the ancient tunnels. Elder, Liara bowed, a gesture of deep respect. How did you? The Helix network connects to our temple, has for 2,000 years since Cross and Silvara established the original seals. Here, Corin's ancient eyes found Marcus. And you, Sentinel heir, welcome to a war you never wanted but cannot escape. Story of my life, Marcus muttered. There is one path that might save both the hostages and stop Varkos. Corin's image gestured, and the hologram changed again, showing lines of text and flowing script. Ancient law, the trial of champions. If formally invoked at the Sacred Heart, Varkos must accept or forfeit all claim to the throne. During the trial period, hostages cannot be harmed under penalty of clan dishonor. How long does the trial period last? From invocation until combat concludes, usually 3 days. Corin's expression grew grave. But you must reach the Sacred Heart first. And Varkos knows this. His forces will do everything possible to stop you. The hologram flickered, breaking up into static. Corin's voice came through distorted. The temple lies 180 kilometers ahead. You have 36 hours before the transmission died. Darkness flooded back, broken only by Marcus's helmet lamp. Liara stood silent for a long moment, then began checking her weapons with mechanical precision. We move fast, no stops except for essential rest. If we can reach the heart and invoke the trial, we buy time for the hostages. And then I fight a warrior in his prime while you watch me die. She looked up, and something fierce were burned in those alien eyes. Then we fight together, Sentinel and Queen, as it was always meant to be. The tunnels twisted deeper into Arcturus IX's frozen crust. Time became meaningless down there, marked only by periodic checks of the Helix device and growing exhaustion that settled into Marcus's bones like lead. His old injuries screamed protest: the knee that caught shrapnel outside Kuwait City, the shoulder that dislocated during emergency evac from a collapsing building, the scar tissue in his lungs that made every breath burn. Lyra moved beside him in silence. Her earlier injuries apparently healed, or simply ignored through force of will. She'd tied her damaged armor tighter, improvised repairs that held through sheer determination. Every so often, she'd pause, ears swiveling to catch sounds Marcus couldn't hear, then continue forward. 12 hours in, they hit the first Imperial patrol. Marcus heard them before the helix sensors registered, voices echoing down stone corridors, speaking in a language that sounded like gravel sliding down glass. Liara grabbed his arm and pulled him into a side crevice, barely wide enough for both of them. They pressed together in the darkness, her body warm against his, despite the cold. 4 hunters stalked past, scanning with equipment that bathed the tunnel in red light. They moved with military precision, covering angles and checking sight lines. Professional, disciplined, deadly. One stopped directly in front of their hiding spot. Marcus held his breath, hand on his pistol, though he knew it would be useless. The hunter's visor swept left, then right, paused, began to turn back toward them. Liara's hand found Marcus's, squeezing gently. That strange warmth spread from the contact point, and suddenly Marcus felt something shift. The sentinel bond, he realized. She was using it to mask their presence, somehow blending them with the surrounding ice. The hunter moved on. The patrol continued down the tunnel and out of sight. Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling like he'd just dodged a bullet in the dark. That won't work on larger groups. Liara's whisper barely stirred the air between them. The bond can hide us from individuals, but mass scans will burn through it. Then we move faster. They did. 16 hours, 20, 24. Time bled together, punctuated by close calls and desperate scrambles through ice caves that seemed designed to kill. The temperature dropped to levels that should have frozen Marcus solid, but the Sentinel bond kept him functional, sharing Liara's inhuman cold resistance. At the 30-hour mark, they stumbled into a rebel encampment. It appeared suddenly, one moment just another frozen cave, the next a fortified position with weapons emplacements and camouflage soldiers. A dozen Draven warriors materialized from concealment, weapons trained on the newcomers. Marcus's hand moved toward his pistol, but Liara stepped forward, pulling back her hood. The reaction was instantaneous. Every warrior dropped to one knee, heads bowed. The closest, a female Draven, maybe 30 years old with fur marked by old scars, actually gasped. "My queen, we thought everyone said you were dead." Zara Swiftclaw. Liara moved forward, genuine warmth entering her voice. "You survived." "Barely." Zara stood, and Marcus saw tears cutting tracks through the fur on her face. "My father gave his life to buy you time to escape." Captain Theron Swiftclaw of the Imperial Guard. "He and 6 others held the palace gates while you fled." Something broke in Liara's composure. She pulled Zara into an embrace that the younger warrior returned fiercely. They stood that way for a long moment, 2 soldiers sharing grief for the fallen. Marcus stayed back, giving them space, recognizing the bond that formed between people who had survived the same hell. His sacrifice wasn't in vain. Liara pulled back, hands on Zara's shoulders. "We're going to finish what he started. Take back the throne." Zara's eyes flicked to Marcus' assessment, clinical and quick. "And this human is my sentinel, Marcus Webb, formerly of Earth's Armed Forces, Desert Storm 1991. The camp stirred. More warriors emerged from concealment. Marcus counted maybe 30 total, all bearing the marks of hard fighting and harder living. They studied him with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Zara led them deeper into the camp to a command center carved from ice and stone. Holographic displays showed tactical data that made Marcus's stomach sink. Varkos controlled everything: major cities, spaceports, communication networks. The rebels held scattered outposts and mountain strongholds, slowly being ground down by superior numbers. "We have 200 fighters scattered across 3 bases." Zara pulled up casualty reports. "Varkos has 5,000 regular troops plus mercenary companies and collaborator forces. We can't win a direct engagement. We're not trying to win a war." Liara traced the route to Sacred Heart on the tactical display. "We need to reach the temple and invoke Trial of Champions. That buys time and forces Varkos into single combat." "With respect, my queen," Zara hesitated. "You're injured, exhausted, and he's trained his entire life for combat. I won't be fighting." Liara looked at Marcus. "My sentinel will stand as champion." The camp exploded in protest. Voices overlapped, angry and disbelieving. Marcus caught fragments. "Human, too old. Suicide, insult to warriors. He couldn't entirely disagree with the assessment. Zara raised one hand and silence fell immediately. You're asking us to bet everything on a human who, forgive me, sir, looks old enough to be retired from active duty. I am retired from active duty. Marcus stepped forward. 68 years old. Bad knee, worse shoulder, lungs full of scar tissue from breathing burning oil in the Gulf War. I fix water pumps on a frozen rock because that's all I'm good for anymore. He paused, making eye contact with as many rebels as possible. But 33 years ago, I was a combat medic in Desert Storm. Operation Desert Saber, February 1991. And I learned something in that desert that your queen seems to understand. Experience beats youth when the shooting starts. I survived that war by being smarter than the enemy, not stronger. I'll do the same with Varkos. The lie tasted like ash. Marcus had no illusions about his chances against a warrior in his prime. But sometimes leadership meant projecting confidence you didn't feel, selling hope you didn't believe in. He'd learned that too, leading what was left of his squad through enemy territory for 3 days because the alternative was giving up and dying. Zara studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll escort you to Sacred Heart. It's 40 kilometers from here, through the most dangerous terrain on Arcturus 9. Every hunter team on the planet is between us and that temple. Then we don't fight them. Marcus pulled up the tactical display studying approach vectors. We move like we did in the Gulf. Small units, rapid movement, avoid contact unless absolutely necessary. Hit them where they're weak, bypass them where they're strong. He sketched routes on the hologram, drawing on 30-year-old training in asymmetric warfare. The rebels watched, and Marcus saw some of the skepticism fade, replaced by grudging respect. By the time he finished, they had a plan that might maybe get them through. Zara assigned 20 warriors as escort. The rest would stage diversionary attacks, pulling hunter teams away from their route. Not enough firepower to win a fight, but enough to create chaos and confusion. They moved out in the camp's third hour, traveling in a convoy of ice crawlers, 8-wheeled vehicles designed for Arctic warfare. Marcus rode in the lead vehicle with Liara and Zara, watching the frozen wasteland roll past through reinforced viewports. Tell me about Desert Storm. Liara's voice cut through the engine noise. Why does it haunt you? Marcus kept his eyes on the ice. I made a bad call. 3 men died because of it. End of story. No, Liara shifted to face him fully. That's the beginning of the story. What happened after? What happened after the inquiry, the finding of no fault, just bad luck and fog of war? The medals that felt like mockery. The discharge that looked honorable but felt like exile. The marriage that couldn't survive what he'd brought home from the desert. The daughter who grew up watching her father drink himself numb every February 26th. After I learned that some mistakes you don't get to fix, you just carry them. And when you saved the Frostmaw's cubs, was that carrying a mistake or learning from one? The question struck deeper than expected. Marcus had no answer. The ambush hit 10 kilometers from Sacred Heart. One moment they were rolling through a narrow ice canyon, the next the lead crawler exploded in a ball of plasma fire. Marcus felt the shock wave even inside their vehicle, watched as the burning wreckage tumbled end over end. 8 rebels gone in an instant. Scatter formation, Zara barked into comms. Evasive pattern delta, don't bunch up. More fire rained from the canyon walls. Hunter teams with heavy weapons positioned perfectly for a kill box. The second crawler took a direct hit, armor buckling. The third tried to reverse but caught a missile in the rear compartment. Fire and screaming filled the comm channel. Marcus's mind flashed to Kuwait, the convoy that hit the minefield because he'd chosen the wrong road. The burning vehicles and dying men, and the smell that haunted his dreams for 3 decades. Marcus, Liara's voice cut through the flashback. We need you here now. He blinked, focusing. Their crawler had taken damage but still moved limping toward what looked like a service tunnel carved into the canyon wall. Zara drove with grim determination while rebels returned fire through gun ports. They made the tunnel entrance as the 4th crawler died behind them. Marcus did the math automatically, 4 vehicles destroyed. 32 rebels. They'd lost more than half their escort in 30 seconds. The tunnel offered temporary shelter, but no real safety. Varkos's hunters would pursue, and the confined space favored their superior numbers. We can't fight them here. Marcus studied the tactical display. We're boxed in. Then we go through them. Zara's hands were white-knuckled on the controls. Punch straight ahead. Hope we break through before they organize. No. Liara's voice carried command that stopped all argument. Marcus, you and I go alone, on foot. Zara, you take the crawler and lead them away. Draw them off. That's a suicide mission. It's a diversionary tactic. Marcus is right, we can't win a stand-up fight. But on foot in the ice caves, we can disappear. Liara's eyes found Marcus. Like in the Gulf, small units, rapid movement, become ghosts. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to find a better option. But tactical reality was brutal and simple. The rebels couldn't both protect them and survive. Sometimes the only way to save anyone was to split forces and trust in speed over strength. All right, he grabbed his gear. But Zara, you don't have to die buying us time. Lead them on a chase, then break contact and vanish. Just like evading Iraqi Scud missiles, hit and fade, never stand still. Zara nodded, something like gratitude flickering across her alien features. Marcus and Liara bailed out while the crawler was still moving, rolling into frozen shadows at the tunnel's edge. The vehicle's engine roared as Zara opened the throttle, racing deeper into the cave system with hunters in pursuit. Weapons fire strobed in the darkness, then faded as the chase moved away. Silence fell. Marcus and Liara crouched in the dark, listening for pursuit. Minutes passed. Nothing moved. 32 people. Marcus's voice came hollow. Dead because they were protecting me. Dead because they chose to fight tyranny. Liara's hand found his shoulder. Don't diminish their sacrifice by making it about your guilt. In Kuwait, you made a decision in fog of war that turned out badly. Here in this cave, we need you making decisions that turn out well. She squeezed gently. I watched you save the Frostmaw cubs. Watched you honor those rebels by using their sacrifice wisely instead of wasting it. That matters more than old ghosts. Something shifted in Marcus's chest. Not forgiveness, he'd never forgive himself for Morrison and the others. But maybe acceptance. Maybe the understanding that carrying the dead didn't mean abandoning the living. We should move. They'll come back when they realize the crawler's empty. They moved. Through ice caves that seemed to go on forever, navigating by the Helix device's holographic map. 35 hours since they'd fled Station Delta 7. 13 hours until the trial deadline. At hour 37, they emerged onto a plateau carved from solid ice. And there, rising from the frozen plain, like a cathedral made of crystallized light, the Sacred Heart Temple. It stretched impossibly tall spires reaching toward Arcturus IX's pale sky. The architecture defied physics, all flowing curves and geometric impossibilities. Light pulsed through translucent walls, making the entire structure seem alive. Marcus stared, brain struggling to process something simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced. It's beautiful. The words felt inadequate. It's home. Liara's voice carried weight Marcus couldn't interpret. I was born in those halls, raised to rule. Lost everything when Varkos's betrayal came. They started down the slope toward the temple. The Helix device chimed urgent warning half a second before the ground exploded. Hunter teams erupted from concealment on all sides, at least 50 warriors fully armed and armored, forming a perfect kill box. Marcus and Liara froze, surrounded and outgunned. No escape, no options. A figure detached from the hunter formation and walked forward. Larger than the others, wearing armor that gleamed like polished bone. His face carried brutal handsomeness, all sharp angles and predatory confidence. When he spoke, his voice rolled across the ice like distant thunder. Hello, little queen. You've led me on quite the chase. Varkos Ironclaw had arrived. Varkos stood like a monument to violence, backlit by the Sacred Heart's pulsing glow. His armor bore no scratches, no battle damage, pristine, as if war was something that happened around him but never touched him. Marcus recognized the type. Officers who stayed behind the line. Leaders who sent others to die while keeping themselves clean. Except the scars on Varkos's exposed forearms told a different story. This warrior had earned his position through blood, not politics. I'm impressed you made it this far. Varkos circled them slowly, flanked by hunters whose weapons never wavered. A dying queen and a geriatric human against the full might of my forces. Statistically impossible. Yet here you stand. I invoke the trial of champions. Liara's voice rang across the frozen plain, formal and absolute. By ancient law, by blood, right by the throne your treachery stole, I claim the right of single combat for the crown. The hunters stirred. Murmurs rippled through their ranks, not agreement, but recognition. They knew the law even if they served the one who'd broken it. Varkos smiled, showing too many teeth. The trial requires you stand before the Sacred Heart and speak the invocation to assembled clans. You're still 50 meters from the threshold. He gestured and the hunters raised their weapons. I could kill you both right here. No witnesses, no law to bind me. Except them. Marcus nodded toward the temple. Figures had appeared in the massive doorway, elderly Draven wearing robes marked with symbols Marcus didn't recognize. At the center stood Elder Corin's staff in handface carved from stone in disapproval. The Sacred Heart sees all Varkos Ironclaw. Corin's voice carried despite the wind. Kill them on holy ground, and you become kinslayer and oathbreaker. Every clan will hunt you. Every house will turn. You'll rule nothing but ashes and enemies. Varkos's jaw clenched. For a moment, Marcus thought he'd order the attack anyway. Tactical advantage versus political consequences, a calculation Marcus had seen officers make before. Usually wrong. Fine, Beres. Varkos stepped back. Reach the threshold. Speak your challenge. I'll even grant you 3 days to prepare as tradition demands. His smile returned colder than the ice beneath their feet. Then I'll kill your champion and watch you kneel before taking your head. The hunters parted, creating a corridor to the temple. Marcus and Lyara walked it together, weapons tracking their every step. The 50 meters felt like 50 kilometers. Any second, Marcus expected betrayal, expected Varkos to change his mind and open fire. His back itched with anticipated impact. They reached the threshold, crossed it. The temperature shifted immediately, still cold, but no longer trying to kill. The temple interior stretched vast and soaring, all impossible angles and light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Liara turned to face the assembled witnesses, temple elders, scattered rebels who'd made it through Varkos's net, even a few of the hunters who'd followed them inside to observe. Her voice rang clear and strong, carrying none of the exhaustion that must have been clawing at her. I am Liara Moonwhisper, daughter of King Theron, the wise heir to the Silver Throne, rightful queen of the Draven Empire. Before these witnesses, before the Sacred Heart itself, I invoke the trial of champions. Let Varkos Ironclaw answer this challenge in single combat, or surrender all claim to the throne he stole through murder and treachery. The words seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with significance Marcus could feel in his bones. The sentinel mark on his chest blazed warm, responding to something fundamental in the invocation. Outside, Varkos laughed. I accept. 3 days hence at dawn in the arena, your champion against mine. He paused. I assume you're sending the human. Marcus Webb stands for me. Then he'll die for you. Prepare yourself for disappointment, little queen. Varkos and his hunters withdrew, the temple doors sealed with a sound like thunder. Only then did Marcus allow himself to breathe. Corin approached, leaning heavily on his staff. Up close, the elder looked impossibly ancient. Fur gone pure white, eyes clouded with age but still sharp with intelligence that had survived centuries. Foolish and brave in equal measure. The old Draven studied Marcus like a specimen. You know you cannot win. I know the odds aren't good. The odds are 0. Varkos has trained since childhood for combat. You're 68 years old with injuries that should have crippled you years ago. Corin's expression softened slightly. But you have sentinel blood. That counts for something. He turned and began walking deeper into the temple. Marcus and Lyara followed through corridors that seemed to shift and change architecture, responding to presence in ways that made Marcus's head hurt. They descended or maybe ascended, spatial relationships became fluid until reaching a chamber that made the Helix Cave look like a closet. Weapon racks lined walls that stretched beyond sight. Armor stands held equipment that gleamed despite millennia of storage. At the chamber's heart, a circular platform pulsed with the same blue light as the Helix device. The armory, Corin gestured broadly. Everything Commander Cross and Queen Silvaro used to seal the first gate. Technology from when humans and Draven fought as equals before the Great Sundering. Marcus approached the nearest armor stand. The suit seemed to flow like liquid metal, all curves and articulated joints. American flag motif works subtly into the shoulder plating, faded but still visible after 2 centuries. He reached out hesitant, and the armor responded, unfurling, opening, inviting him to step inside. It will accept you because you carry Cross's blood. Corinne moved to a control panel that looked simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced. But acceptance and mastery are different things. You have 3 days to learn what took Cross 3 years. Then we'd better get started. The first day passed in a blur of failure and frustration. The armor felt wrong, too heavy, too tight, restricting rather than enhancing. Marcus took one step and nearly fell as the servos anticipated movement he wasn't making. Took another, and the knee joint locked up, freezing him mid-stride. "You're fighting it," Liara watched from the chamber's edge. "Stop trying to control the armor. Let it read your intent." Easy to say, harder to do. Marcus had spent 40 years in rigid control, keeping everything locked down tight. The armor wanted connection, wanted to blur the line between man and machine, wanted access to thoughts and memories he'd spent decades trying to wall off. Hour 6, the armor's HUD activated, flooding his vision with tactical data he couldn't interpret. He shut it down, overwhelmed. Hour 12, Corinne introduced weapons. A blade that hummed with contained energy. A pistol that fired coherent light instead of bullets. Marcus's hands remembered weapon drills from basic training 45 years ago. Muscle memory competing with arthritis and scar tissue. Hour 18, he sparred with Liara. She moved like water, flowing from strike to counter without visible effort. Marcus lumbered like a tank, predictable and slow. She put him on his back 7 times in 5 minutes. "Stop thinking," she offered a hand up. "Your military training, all that discipline, all that structure, it's making you rigid. The armor needs fluidity." "I'm 68. Fluidity left the building around the same time as my hairline." "Then fight like you're 68. Use experience. Use cunning. Stop trying to match Varkos's strength and find his weakness." The second day brought incremental progress. Marcus learned to let the armor anticipate instead of commanding it. Learned to trust the AI's tactical analysis. Learned that surviving wasn't about winning every exchange, but about not losing the ones that mattered. Hour 36, he managed to land a hit on Liara during sparring. Just one, but she looked genuinely surprised. Hour 42, the armor systems finally synced with his nervous system. Movement became less forced, more natural. Not graceful, he'd never be graceful, but functional. Hour 48, Marcus collapsed against a weapon rack, body screaming protest. His knee felt like ground glass. His shoulder burned with every movement. The scar tissue in his lungs made breathing an adventure in pain. Liara sat beside him, offering water that tasted of minerals and something else, stimulant maybe, or medicine. She'd removed her damaged armor, revealing the injuries beneath. Bruises painted her torso in spectacular colors. The wound from when he'd first found her had reopened, leaking blood through makeshift bandaging. "You should be resting." Marcus nodded toward the injury. "Not training your doomed champion." "We're both doomed if you lose. Might as well spend the time together." Something in her tone made Marcus look up. She met his eyes, and he saw fear there, not for herself, but for him. For what would happen when the trial began and he faced Varkos in earnest. In Desert Storm, before major operations, we'd write letters home, just in case. Marcus surprised himself by speaking. Tell people what we needed to say because tomorrow might not come. "What would you write if you could to Sarah, my daughter?" Marcus stared at his hands, scarred and calloused and showing every year. "I'd tell her I'm sorry for running. Sorry for letting ghosts matter more than the living. Sorry I chose isolation over being her father." He paused. "And I'd tell her I finally stopped running. Finally stood for something. Even if I don't win, at least I fought." Liara's hand found his clawed fingers intertwining with human ones. The sentinel mark blazed warm between them. "I watched my entire family die, Marcus. Mother, father, 3 siblings. The only reason I survived was Captain Theron throwing himself in front of the blade meant for me. 30 loyal guards gave their lives, buying me time to escape." Her voice cracked. "I've carried that weight every day since. The guilt of survival. The burden of all those deaths being for nothing if I fail. They weren't for nothing. You're here, fighting back. So are you, fighting back against whatever Kuwait did to you. They sat in silence, two broken people sharing damage neither could fix. Then Liara leaned her head against Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of trust and exhaustion, and something that felt dangerously close to affection. If this is our last night, she trailed off. Marcus knew what she was offering, knew the comfort two people could find in each other when death waited in the morning. He'd felt that pull before in the desert when every dawn might be the last and physical connection was the only thing that proved you were still alive. He kissed her forehead, gentle, chaste, carrying care, but not promise. If we survive, ask me again. The third day arrived with dawn light filtering through the temple's crystalline walls. Marcus stood in the armory, running through final checks, while Corin made adjustments to the armor's power distribution. There's something you need to know. Corin's voice carried unusual gravity. The bond between Sentinel and Queen, it goes deeper than protection or loyalty. How deep? Soul-bound pairs share life force. If one dies while the bond is active, the other follows within hours. Corin met Marcus's eyes. Liara didn't tell you because she feared you'd refuse to fight. But you deserve to know if you fall in the arena, she dies too. The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus had assumed he was fighting for her throne, for the hostages, for stopping the gate. He hadn't realized he was literally fighting for both their lives. Why would the bond work that way? Because sentinels were never meant to be disposable bodyguards. They were partners, equals. The bond ensured complete commitment. You cannot protect someone properly if your own survival matters more than theirs. Marcus looked down at the sentinel mark on his chest, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. How many times had he wished for death over the past 33 years? How many nights had he considered just ending it, stopping the nightmares and guilt, an endless replaying of mistakes? But now his death meant Liara's too. Now suicide became murder. Does she know you told me? She will soon enough. Corin stepped back, examining his work. The armor is ready. You're as prepared as 3 days allows. The rest depends on what you carry in here. He tapped Marcus's chest over the mark. And here, he tapped Marcus's head. Experience and cunning, not strength. Remember that. Liara entered wearing formal robes that somehow survived the journey. She moved with regal bearing, every inch the queen, despite exhaustion and injury. Behind her came rebels who'd made it to the temple, maybe 50 total, all that remained of the resistance. The trial begins at dawn, her voice carried to every corner. Win or lose, what happens today decides everything. If Marcus falls, I fall with him. Varkos takes the throne. The gate opens. Everyone does. She paused. But if Marcus wins, we take back what was stolen. We restore the seal. We build something better from the ashes. Zara stepped forward, battered and bleeding but alive. Her convoy had survived barely through Marcus's hit-and-fade tactics. We believe in you, my queen, and we believe in your champion. Others took up the cry. Voices echoed off impossible architecture, 50 throats shouting faith and defiance. Marcus stood in his armor, feeling their conviction like physical weight. He couldn't let them down. Couldn't let Liara down. Couldn't let himself down again. I need to tell you something. Liara approached after the rebels dispersed. Corin told you about the soul-bound connection. He did. I should have told you earlier, but I was afraid. I know. Marcus cut her off gently. You were afraid I'd find another way, or refuse to fight. And there is no other way. He cupped her face, feeling the alien texture of fur against his palms. I'm not angry. I'm grateful. Grateful. For 33 years, I've been half dead. Walking around but not really living. You gave me a reason to fight. A reason to trip on me. He smiled and meant it. If I'm going down, at least I'm going down swinging. She kissed him, then desperate and fierce, pouring everything unsaid into the contact. Marcus kissed back, letting walls crumble, letting himself feel for the first time in years. When they broke apart, both were shaking. Come back to me. I promise I'll try. The arena stood separate from the temple, carved from ice and ancient stone. Massive and circular, ringed by seating that could hold thousands. Today it held maybe 500 rebels and temple elders on one side, Varkos's hunters and collaborators was on the other. Between them, neutral clans who'd come to witness, to see if the law still meant something. Marcus walked through the preparation chamber entrance into killing ground flooded with Arcturus IX's pale sunlight. His armor's environmental systems compensated for temperature, but he felt the cold anyway, not physical, but anticipatory. The cold of knowing what came next. Varkos waited at the arena's center wearing armor that looked like it had been forged from darkness itself. Two massive figures flanked him, his champions, each one larger and more heavily armed than Marcus. The trap became obvious immediately. Ancient law says I can choose seconds. Varkos's voice carried across the arena. You'll fight all three of us human. Hope your geriatric heart can take the strain. The crowd erupted. Liara's rebels shouted protest. Even some of Varkos's own hunters looked uncomfortable. The neutral clan stirred, recognizing a violation of spirit, if not letter of law. Corin stood in the judgment box, staff raised for silence. The law allows seconds in trials of succession. Varkos acts within his rights, though not within honor. No help there. Marcus was on his own against three warriors, each one capable of killing him individually. The math was brutal and simple. He activated the armor's combat protocol. The HUD lit up with tactical analysis, threat assessment, probability calculations, recommended strategies. Every analysis reached the same conclusion: survival chance less than 5%. Well, Marcus muttered to himself, I've had worse odds. That was a lie, but sometimes you needed lies to function. The arena master, a neutral elder, raised his staff. By ancient law, by blood, right, by honor of the throne, let trial begin. The staff fell. Varkos's champions charged. Marcus had maybe 3 seconds to appreciate how completely outmatched he was. Then training kicked in, not the armor training from the past 3 days, but 40 years of improvisation and survival instinct, refined in deserts and disasters. The champions came like avalanches, all mass and momentum. Marcus didn't try to meet them head on. Instead, he moved lateral, forcing them to choose angles to commit to attack vectors. The left champion, bigger, slower, overextended on a lunge that would have taken Marcus's head off. Marcus wasn't there anymore, sliding under the blade and striking at the knee joint where armor plates met. His energy blade found purchase. The champion roared and stumbled, leg compromised. 1 threat reduced, 2 remaining. The right champion learned from his partner's mistake. Cautious now, hanging back while the first recovered. They'd box him in coordinate attacks, use superior numbers to eliminate options. Kuwait flashed through Marcus's mind. The ambush that killed Morrison. His squad surrounded and outgunned and dying. But they'd survived, some of them, because Marcus had refused to play by enemy rules. Had found angles nobody expected. Had turned weaknesses into weapons. The arena's ice floor, smooth as glass. Perfect for beings with claws that could grip. Terrible for heavy armor that depended on magnetic boots. Marcus triggered the armor's jump jets not for height, but for lateral acceleration across the ice. He became a missile, skimming the surface momentum, carrying him between the champions before they could react. His blade trailed to energy, scoring shallow cuts across both as he passed. Not enough to kill, enough to bleed. He slammed into the arena wall hard enough to crack armor plates. Pain exploded through old injuries: the knee, the shoulder, the ribs that had never quite healed right. The HUD flashed warnings about structural integrity and internal damage. Get up, old man. Varkos hadn't moved from his position. My champions haven't even started. Marcus pushed himself vertical, every movement agony. The champions advanced again, more careful now, respecting an opponent who'd survived the first exchange. Blood leaked from their wounds, not much, but enough to paint the ice red. Round 2. The champions split up, flanking from opposite sides. No more single attacks. Coordinated assault meant Marcus couldn't focus on just one threat. He'd have to divide attention, split resources, except that he couldn't defend everywhere at once. So he didn't try. Marcus charged the left champion, the one with the damaged knee, committing fully to the attack. The champion raised his guard, expecting Marcus to strike high. Instead, Marcus went low, sliding under the guard and driving his blade into the compromised joint with everything the armor's servos could provide. The joint shattered. The champion went down roaring. Marcus rolled away as the right champion's blade crashed into the ice where he'd been cracking the surface. Close. Too close. His HUD screamed warnings. Structural damage to the armor's leg assembly. Energy reserves at 60%. Cardiac stress approaching dangerous levels. Basically, his body and equipment were failing simultaneously. One champion down, one still mobile, and Varkos waiting fresh and ready. The remaining champion pressed hard, not giving Marcus time to recover. Blade strikes came fast and precise, each one testing defenses, probing for weakness. Marcus gave ground, letting the champion push him across the arena. His knees screamed with each impact. His lungs burned. The armor's support systems worked overtime, keeping his 68-year-old body functional. Then he saw it the moment the champion overextended just slightly. Weight shifted wrong, guard dropping for half a second. Lyara's voice echoed in memory. Stop trying to match strength. Find weakness. Marcus lunged forward instead of back. His blade found the throat, that vulnerable gap between helmet and chestplate where no armor could fully protect. The champion's eyes widened in shock, then went dim. Two down. Marcus stood over the body, gasping, armor's medical systems flooding his bloodstream with stimulants and painkillers. Not enough. Never enough. Varkos applauded, slow and mocking. I'm actually impressed. Two champions dead. You lasted longer than I expected. He drew his own blade, longer than Marcus's, edged with something that made the air shimmer. But now you face me, and I've been training for this fight since before your daughter was born. Marcus forced himself to steady stance, blade raised, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Through the mind, he felt Lyara's terror mixing with desperate hope. She believed he could win. Against all logic and evidence, she believed he couldn't let her down. Even if it killed him, which it probably would, he had to try. Varkos moved. Fast. Impossibly fast for someone his size. The blade came from an angle Marcus didn't see would have taken his head if the armor's AI hadn't triggered an emergency dodge routine. Even so, the edge scored across his chest plate, cutting deep, exposing the helix device beneath. Warning klaxons screamed. The device sparked, damaged but still functional. Marcus staggered back, nearly fell, caught himself on pure stubbornness. That's the difference between us. Varkos circled like a predator. You're fighting to survive. I'm fighting to win. Marcus's vision swam. Blood loss, cardiac stress system shock. The armor kept him upright but couldn't keep him conscious much longer. He had maybe one more exchange before his body quit entirely. Through the bond, he felt Lyara's terror, her desperate hope, her absolute faith that he could somehow impossibly pull victory from defeat. He'd promised to try. Time to make good. Marcus triggered every combat protocol the armor possessed, simultaneously targeting trajectory, calculation, power distribution, threat analysis. Let the AI handle tactics while his mind focused on a single objective, survive long enough to strike once. Varkos attacked. Marcus defended, barely, blade meeting blade in showers of energy. The exchange lasted seconds but felt like hours. Strike, parry, counter, repeat. Marcus gave ground with each impact armor, failing body breaking, but not stopping, never stopping. Then the opening came. Varkos's blade caught in Marcus's guard, locked for just a moment. Not long, barely half a second. Long enough, Marcus didn't go for the kill, went for the victory. His blade swept low, striking Varkos's knee with the same precision he'd used on the first champion. Armor buckled. Varkos roared and stumbled. Marcus pressed the advantage, years of medical training showing him exactly where to strike. Not to kill, to disable. Shoulder joint, hip articulation, weak points in armor designed for intimidation over protection. Varkos went down. Marcus's blade found his throat, energy field humming against flesh. The arena went silent. Yield! Marcus's voice came out barely above a whisper, amplified by the armor's external speakers. Yield or die. Varkos stared up, and Marcus saw calculation in those eyes, weighing odds, measuring outcomes. Finally grinding out the words like broken glass, I yield. The arena erupted, rebels screaming victory, neutral clans roaring approval. Even some of Varkos's own hunters showing respect for combat well fought. Marcus stood over his defeated enemy, blade still active, until arena officials moved to take Varkos into custody. Then his armor's power cut out. Marcus collapsed, hit the ice hard enough to crack already damaged plates. The world spun, vision tunneling to a point. He felt Lyara running toward him, felt her hands on his helmet, heard her voice distorted by failing audio systems. Marcus, stay with me, we won, you won. He tried to respond, couldn't. The darkness had waited long enough. It took him under despite Liara's desperate grip, despite everything still left undone. His last thought before unconsciousness claimed him, I kept the promise. I tried. Marcus woke to white walls and the smell of antiseptic. For a confused moment, he thought he was back in Kuwait, in the field hospital after the convoy ambush. Then memory returned, the arena Varkos, the impossible fight he'd somehow survived. Easy. Liara's face appeared above him, fur matted with dried tears, eyes red-rimmed but relieved. You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Medical AI says you suffered cardiac arrest, 3 broken ribs, complete exhaustion, and enough internal trauma to kill most humans half your age. But I'm alive. His voice came out as a rasp. We're alive. She corrected, squeezing his hand. The soulbound connection means I felt everything you went through. Every injury, every moment of pain. I thought I'd lost you 3 times. Marcus struggled to sit up. Liara helped him, supporting his weight. They were in the temple's medical facility equipment that looked ancient but functioned with impossible precision. Through the window, he could see Arcturus IX's pale sky, and in the distance, activity around what must be the arena. The hostages, released 2 hours after your victory, Varkos's forces are withdrawing under terms of the trial. American command sent ships to evacuate the colonists. Liara smiled, and it transformed her alien features. Your daughter is among them. Captain Sarah Chen arrived this morning asking to see her father. Marcus's chest tightened. Sarah was here. After 3 years of avoiding her calls, of running from the relationship he'd damaged beyond repair, she'd come. And he had no idea what to say. Where is she? Waiting outside. I can ask her to come back later if you need. No. Marcus shook his head. I've made her wait long enough. The door opened. Sarah entered wearing U.S. Space Command dress uniform, captain's bars gleaming. At 42, she looked so much like her mother it hurt. But her eyes, those were Marcus's own, carrying the same weight of duty and loss. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Sarah crossed the room and pulled him into a hug that made his broken ribs scream. He didn't care. He held on, feeling tears he'd suppressed for decades finally break through. I saw the broadcast. Sarah's voice muffed against his shoulder. The whole galaxy watched you fight. Dad, you were incredible. I was terrified. I know. That's what made it incredible. She pulled back, hands on his shoulders. You stopped running. Finally faced something instead of hiding. I'm sorry, sweetheart. For everything. For the drinking, for the distance, for choosing isolation over being your father. I know. Sarah smiled through tears. And we'll talk about it. We'll have time to talk about everything. But right now, I'm just glad you're alive. Corrin entered, leaning on his staff, followed by several temple elders and what looked like official delegation members. Their robes carried symbols Marcus now recognized, representatives from various Draven clans. Marcus Webb, Corrin's formal tone suggested ceremony incoming. By right of trial, by victory in honorable combat, by the witnessed defeat of the usurper Queen Liara, Moonwhisper reclaims her throne. And you, Sentinel heir, have proven yourself worthy of the bond you carry. Liara stood, pulling Marcus up with her, despite the medical AI's protests. She faced the assembled witnesses with the bearing of someone who'd never really stopped being queen, even in exile. 3 days from now, we will hold formal coronation. But today, I make my first decree as restored monarch. Her voice carried power and certainty. For 2,000 years, sentinels have been treated as property, bound by law, commanded by royalty, given no choice in their service. This ends now. She turned to Marcus. Sentinels will be partners, not servants. Equals, not tools. And I name Marcus Webb not just my sentinel, but Lord Protector of the realm and royal consort, with full rights and authority to stand beside the throne as equal. The delegation stirred. Marcus saw approval on some faces, shock on others. Change didn't come easy, even when it was right. Furthermore, Liara continued, I formally recognize the alliance between the Draven Empire and the United States of America. The cooperation between our peoples during this crisis has shown what we can accomplish together. Let this be the foundation of lasting peace. Sarah stepped forward, coming to attention. Captain Sarah Chen, U.S. Space Command, I'm authorized to convey the government's acceptance of your alliance proposal, Your Majesty. We look forward to diplomatic relations and mutual cooperation. The ceremony concluded. Officials dispersed to handle the thousand details that came with regime change. Sarah stayed long enough to promise she'd visit again tomorrow, then left to coordinate the hostage evacuation. Finally, Marcus and Liara were alone. Royal consort. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're moving kind of fast, don't you think? We're soul-bound, literally bound for life. Might as well make it official. She moved closer, a question in her alien eyes. Unless you're planning to run again, Mom. No. Marcus surprised himself with how much he meant it. No more running. I'm done with that. Good. She kissed him gentle this time, carrying promise rather than desperation. Because there's a lot of work ahead. Rebuilding the government, rooting out Varkos's collaborators, maintaining the seals on the gates. Speaking of Varkos, what happened to him? Liara's expression darkened. That's complicated. During transfer to secure detention, there was an incident. 3 guards killed. Varkos escaped into the chaos. Marcus's blood ran cold. He's loose. With a small group of loyalists, intelligence suggests he fled off-world. She pulled up a holographic display showing intercepted communications. But that's not the worst part. During the raid on his compound, we found a laboratory, research into the void gates, and evidence that he'd already extracted genetic material from a captured devourer. The implications hit like a hammer. Varkos wasn't just a defeated enemy nursing his wounds. He was a threat with resources, knowledge, and apparently samples of the very thing that could destroy the galaxy. We need to find him. We will, but first we rebuild. We consolidate power. We prepare for whatever comes next. Liara's hand found his. Together. 3 days later, the coronation ceremony filled the Sacred Heart with representatives from every Draven clan and dignitaries from a dozen allied species. Marcus stood beside the throne wearing formal robes that felt simultaneously ancient and uncomfortable. The armor had been repaired and returned to the armory he hoped he'd never need it again, but knew better than to count on peace of her peace. Corrin placed the restored star crown on Liara's head. The crystal glowed, responding to her presence whole again. After being shattered in the snow that night, Marcus found her. It felt like a lifetime ago. In many ways it was. By ancient law, by blood right, by trial combat, I proclaimed Liara Moonwhisper restored as rightful queen of the Draven Empire. Corrin's voice echoed off impossible walls. May her reign bring prosperity and peace. The assembled crowd roared approval. Marcus watched Liara transform in that moment, not physically, but in bearing. The weight of crown and responsibility settling onto shoulders that had always carried it even in exile. She was magnificent. The ceremony continued for hours, oaths of fealty from clan leaders, treaties signed with allied governments, proclamations about new policies and old traditions restored. Marcus played his part, standing when required, speaking when prompted, trying not to let exhaustion show. Finally, as evening light turned the temple walls to amber and gold, they had a moment alone in Liara's private chambers rooms she hadn't seen in months, preserved exactly as she'd left them. I keep expecting to wake up, Marcus admitted, staring out the window at the city below. Lights were returning to buildings that had been dark under Varkos's rule. Life resuming. 3 weeks ago, I was fixing water pumps on a frozen rock. Now I'm royal consort to an alien empress. It doesn't feel real. It's real. Liara joined him at the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. And it's going to be complicated. There are factions who oppose my return, clans who benefited under Varkos's rule, enemies who'll see you as a weakness to exploit. Let them try. Marcus surprised himself with the conviction in his voice. I survived Desert Storm, Kuwait, and Varkos. I can handle political intrigue. Can you handle this? Liara turned to face him, and Marcus saw vulnerability beneath the regal bearing. A real relationship, not just a bond forced by circumstance, building something together day by day without knowing if we're compatible beyond crisis. Marcus thought about that, about Sarah growing up watching her parents' marriage disintegrate because neither could bridge the gap between who they'd been before the war and who they'd become after. About 3 years of self-imposed isolation because engaging with people meant risking connection, and connection meant potential loss. I don't know, he answered honestly. I'm still figuring out how to live instead of just survive. But I'd like to try. If you're willing to be patient with a 68-year-old man learning how to be human again. She smiled, that alien expression he'd learned to recognize as affection and hope mixed together. I'm 240 years old in human terms. I can be patient. 3 months passed. Marcus settled into a routine that felt surreal, mornings spent in council meetings discussing resource allocation and diplomatic relations, afternoons training young Draven warriors, in human tactical thinking evenings, with Lyara planning for futures both political and personal. Sarah visited twice more, bringing her husband and Marcus's two grandchildren he'd never met, 7 and 5 years old, wide-eyed at the alien city, and their grandfather, who'd become something out of legend. The first meeting was awkward, the second easier. By the third, Marcus was teaching his grandson basic first aid, while his granddaughter asked Liara 1,000 questions about being queen. "You're good with them," Liara observed one evening after Sarah's family had returned to their hotel. "Natural. I wasn't with Sarah, too caught up in my own damage to be the father she needed." Marcus watched the city lights through the window. "Maybe I'm getting a second chance. Maybe we both are." 1 week later, Lyara called him to the throne room with unusual urgency. He found her studying a holographic display showing stellar cartography systems and sectors and the web of connections between them. "What's wrong?" "Potentially everything." She gestured, and the display shifted to show a remote system at the edge of Draven space. 3 days ago, a mining colony went silent. Yesterday, a scout ship investigated. They found the colony intact but empty, 15,000 people that vanished without a trace. No signs of violence, no distress signals, just gone. Raiders. That's what I thought initially. But the scout ship detected unusual energy readings similar to what we found in Varkos's laboratory. Her eyes met his. "I think he's begun phase 2, whatever that means. And I think it involves the Devourers." Marcus felt the weight of the sentinel mark on his chest pulsing with that now familiar warmth. He'd hoped for peace. Hoped that defeating Varkos in the arena would end the threat. But threats never really ended, did they? They just evolved, changed form, found new angles of attack. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to lead an investigation team. Take Zara and a squad of our best warriors. Find out what happened to that colony. And if Varkos is involved..." She trailed off. "I'll stop him." Marcus heard the conviction in his own voice. "Whatever he's planning, we'll stop it." 2 days later, Marcus stood in the shuttle bay wearing the Sentinel armor again, repaired, upgraded, somehow more comfortable than it had been during the trial. Zara and her team loaded equipment while Sarah watched from the observation deck. "Be careful out there, Dad." "Always am." "That's a lie," she smiled. "But I appreciate the effort. When you get back, bring everyone home safe." "You're good at that." Was he Morrison and the others would disagree? But maybe Sarah was right. Maybe 33 years of carrying the dead had taught him enough about loss to prevent more of it. Maybe experience mattered. Liara appeared as they were running final checks. She pulled Marcus aside, away from the team's curious eyes. "I have something for you." She pressed a small device into his palm, cylindrical, covered in the same symbols as the Helix sphere. "Commander Cross left this with Queen Selvara before the final battle. It's a communication link keyed to the Sentinel-Queen bond. No matter how far apart we are, we can reach each other." Marcus activated it. The device pulsed warm, syncing with the mark on his chest, and suddenly he felt Lyara's presence even more clearly than before. Her emotions, her thoughts, the steady certainty that radiated from her like heat. "Thank you. Come back to me." She kissed him, fierce and possessive. "We have a wedding to plan, remember." "A wedding?" Marcus pulled back, startled. "I don't recall proposing." "You proposed when you fought Varkos. You proposed when you chose to stay instead of run. The ceremony is just formality." Her eyes danced with mischief that seemed very unqueenly. "Unless you're backing out?" "No." Marcus laughed, genuine, surprised laughter that felt foreign and wonderful. "No, I'm not backing out. When I get back, we'll plan the most ridiculous cross-species diplomatic wedding event this galaxy has ever seen." "Good, because I already sent invitations." The shuttle launched an hour later, breaking orbit around Arcturus 9 and jumping to hyperspace on a trajectory that would take them to the edge of known space. Marcus watched the planet shrink in the viewport, that frozen rock that had been his prison and his salvation, where he'd found purpose and partnership, and something that felt dangerously like happiness. "Sir," Zara's voice pulled him from reflection. Estimated arrival at the colony is 18 hours. I've prepared briefing materials on what the scout ship found. Let's review them. And Zara, Marcus turned to face her. Just Marcus is fine. I spent 40 years being Sir in the army. I'm done with that. Yes, see Marcus. She smiled, showing teeth. Your daughter told me to tell you something before we left. She said you'd understand, Morrison would be proud. The words hit deeper than expected. Marcus had spent 3 decades certain that Morrison and the others would hate him for surviving when they didn't, for the choices that led to their deaths. But maybe Sarah was right. Maybe the man dying in his arms had wanted him to live well, not just survive. Maybe the best way to honor the dead was to protect the living. Then let's make sure we give him something to be proud of. The shuttle jumped, carrying them toward unknown dangers and uncertain futures. Behind them, Lyara felt the tug of distance through the bond, but also the warmth of connection that transcended space. Her hand rested on her abdomen, still flat, no visible sign yet, but the medical scan had been clear. Life growing, a child that would bridge 2 species, 2 worlds, 2 people who'd found each other in the frozen dark. She smiled, touching the communicator device's twin that hung around her neck, and sent a pulse of warmth and confidence through the bond. Marcus would feel it even light years away. Would know she believed in him, trusted him, loved him. And he sent back determination and promise, wordless, but clear enough. He'd come home. They'd face whatever Varkos had planned together. They'd build the future cross and Silvera had died trying to protect. The Queen and her sentinel, partners, equals, soulbound. The story continued. But this chapter at least had found its ending, not perfect, not without cost, but earned through blood and choice and the stubborn refusal to give up when giving up would have been easier. In the frozen halls of the Sacred Heart, Corin sat alone, studying ancient texts that spoke of prophecies and cycles and the eternal struggle between chaos and order. The void gates were sealed again, yes, but Varkos lived, and living threats had a way of becoming tomorrow's crises. But tomorrow could wait. Today, a queen ruled justly. Today, a broken soldier had found redemption. Today, 2 species began the long work of building bridges instead of walls. Today was enough. The war, after all, was never truly over. But sometimes, just sometimes, you won battles that mattered. And those victories, however temporary, were worth fighting for. Marcus Webb, maintenance worker turned sentinel, would have agreed. After all, he'd spent 40 years learning that lesson in the hardest way possible. The dead taught you to value the living. Lost taught you to cherish what remained. And sometimes on frozen planets at the edge of space, you found your last chance at redemption. All you had to do was refuse to run one more time. That was enough. That would always be enough.